Hello, and welcome to Give Me Credit. I'm J.S. Waldo, and I am here with our credit genius, John Mackey. Hi, John. How are you today?
Great, JS. How about yourself?
Doing well. Finally feeling better, and it sounds like you are a little scratchy throat.
I am. I've got a cough, so if I
Yep,
cough during this, I apologize, but there's not a thing I can do about it.
nothing at all. I get it. Today, we're going to talk about John's new course that he's built for all of you called Debt Collections, Lies, Damn Lies, and Deceit.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, I'm really excited to start talking about this more. So, John, we're going to jump right into it. John, everyday people do everything they're told, pay what they can, answer the phone, try to be honest, and still wake up to accounts exploding, scores collapsing, access disappearing. No warning, no explanation, just damage. What is actually happening behind the curtain?
Well, what's happening is that people aren't being evaluated as humans anymore. They're being processed as what I like to term data exhaust. Their silence becomes permission. Their fear becomes documentation. Their good faith becomes a transaction log that they never get to see. Behind the scenes, debts are being sold, recoded, re-aged, rescored by systems designed to profit from confusion. One casual call, one emotional payment, one update to the wrong party in a clean file quietly turns radioactive. The tragedy isn't that the system is complicated. It's that nobody tells the consumer they're in a game until they've already lost.
Your course is called Debt Collections, Lies, Damn Lies, and Deceit. Let's start simple. What's the biggest lie consumers believe about debt collection?
Certainly one of them, if not the most important thing that they misunderstand, is that paying fixes everything, and it doesn't. Payment without proof of ownership, validation, and lawful authority is like handing your car keys to someone who says they're a mechanic without really checking the shop, even if it exists.
So people think they're being reasonable, but they're actually creating the evidence that can be used against them.
Yeah, exactly. Every call you took, every dollar you spent, every time you try to explain your situation, you were quietly manufacturing evidence, and you didn't even know it. That call log wasn't customer service. It was a timeline. That hardship story wasn't compassion. It was an admission. That good faith payment wasn't responsibility. It was confirmation of liability. None of it lives in your records. It lives in theirs, though, inside internal account notes, call center CRM systems, collection scripts, score models, and debt buyer portfolios that you were never allowed to inspect. By the time a lawsuit showed up, the narrative was already written. Dates, dollar amounts, alleged acknowledgments, alleged promises. You were no longer a person with a story. You were a data package with the price tag. And the cruel part? You didn't even lose control in court. You lost the first time you spoke without understanding the game.
You know, I always come back to this, John,
Yeah.
and it's frustrating, but why didn't anyone ever teach this in school?
Well, we didn't just teach people to be honest. We taught them to be unprotectedly honest. And that's, a very valid item. Just be honest. We tell our people that from a young age. People learned that explaining themselves was the right thing to do. If there was a problem, you talked about it, you asked forgiveness, and you moved on. You shared your side. You trusted that being open would make things better. But the debt collection world works by a completely different rule book. Collectors aren't trained to understand you. They are trained to guide conversations in ways to pull out statements that can later be used as proof. They follow scripts. They record call notes. They track what you say, how you say it, and when you said it, not to solve your problem, but to build a case file. So the consumer comes in with honesty. The system comes in with a plan. We don't teach people to lie. We teach people to shut up and say, prove it. Prove their own debt. Proof that they have the right to collect. Proof that they have the right to enforce. People think a conversation will clear things up. In reality, that conversation is often the moment they lose control without even realizing a fight has begun.
So, who is this course really for? Someone already being sued or someone who wants to make sure that never happens?
Well, in reality, both, but ideally the second group, because the strongest defense is one you never have to use. Prevention is power. Once a collector has leverage, every move you make becomes reactive. You're responding to their deadlines, their framing, their version of events. At that point, you're not deciding anymore. You're just trying to survive. The course I wrote isn't about teaching people how to argue better with debt collectors. It's about teaching them how to stop the leverage from even forming, how to recognize the moment a simple conversation becomes a documented admission, how to understand when silence is not avoidance, but strategy, how to spot the difference between a real creditor and a data broker with a script. Because when you remove their leverage, you don't need bravado. You need threats. Let me back up. You don't
Mhm.
need threats. You don't even need to fight. You simply never hand them that weapon.
Well, let's talk about what's actually inside your course. Walk me through the structure. What does someone actually get when they enroll?
Well, first of all, they don't get just information. They get a framework that lets them see the entire machine instead of reacting to pieces of it. Now, I've broken this down in what we term modules, but in reality is chapters. And for example, module one, chapter one, is the Dunning letter myth. Students learn that the first collection letter isn't a courtesy. It's really a positioning document. They see how language is engineered to provoke response, reset timelines, and manufacture implied acknowledgement before any proof exists. Then we go to module two. Who actually owns the debt? Now, here we tear apart the difference between assignment and purchase. Students learn why most collectors can't prove chain of title, how portfolios are sold in bulk, and why a missing link in ownership collapses their entire system. Module three is forcing proof before a speech. This is where leverage disappears. Students learn how to legally demand validation before a single word is even given away, and how timing errors by collectors permanently poison their own case. Module four, what we term the Mackey warning, is built after the Miranda warning. It's one sentence, perfectly structured, no emotion, no story, just a clean boundary that stops evidence and distracts and forces the file back onto their side of the desk. Module 5, we go over Regulation F. This is the new battlefield. Regulation F was an interpretation of the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. It's the new battlefield. They learn how email, text, portals, and convenience features quietly expand surveillance and content, and how to shut those doors without ever looking uncooperative. Module 6, halfway through the book now, when paper becomes a weapon. Summons, lawsuits, affidavits, robo-signed exhibits. Students learn what's real, what's theater, and where collectors most often self-destruct. Module 7, validation failures and pressure collapse. They learn how missed deadlines, defective responses, and procedural shortcuts create fatal defects in enforcement. Module 8, this is where the fog lifts. Students see how portfolios are priced, why silence raises asset value, and how their behavior changes the resale math. And Module 9 is reading portfolios like a prosecutor. By the end, they're no longer borrowers reacting to threats. They're analysts reading risk. They understand patterns, red flags, and structural weaknesses long before a courtroom ever appears. As I've said before, this isn't education, it's system literacy.
Yeah, that sounds like law school without the debt.
And without the blind spots.
Okay, so what happens if people don't learn this?
Well, people don't learn this. People haven't been learning this. They keep mistaking movement for progress and compliance for safety. They keep answering calls thinking they're solving problems when they're actually building case files. They keep making good faith payments that don't reduce risk, they increase it. They keep explaining hardship, updating contact information, trying to be reasonable, never realizing that each step is tightening the system's grip. Then one day the denial letter arrives, or the summons, or the wage garnishment, and it feels sudden, totally unfair, out of nowhere. But it wasn't sudden. It wasn't cumulative. They weren't losing in court. They were losing in conversation.
Okay, so on the flip side, what if they do learn it?
Then they can stop reacting and start deciding. They don't feel brave. They feel clear. And once you understand the system, you can start standing up. And you can stand up without saying anything. It's the matter of approach.
So, all right, I want you to pause for a second. Not tomorrow, not after the next call, right now. Everybody just stop. Because everything John just laid out only matters if you decide to stop reacting and start choosing. If your phone has ever controlled your mood, if a stranger's script has ever pushed you into a payment that you didn't understand, if you ever felt like your own information was being used against you, and if you already know you're stuck in a game, but nobody ever gave you the rules, this is where you start learning how to play it.
Yeah, debt collections, lies, damn lies, and deceit. It's not about winning arguments. It's about never letting the system write your story. They don't have a right to write your story.
Mm-mm.
Make them prove the item.
So for our listeners, what I want them to know is enrollment is open now. Links are below. And John, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If someone gets one sentence from this course, what must it be? What is that?
The one statement you make when you receive that first phone call. Have this in your brain. And it's this, quote, please give me everything in writing and send it to the address you have on file. End quote. Verify nothing with them. That sentence takes care of everything they need to do. You take the ball in your hand and you start with that sentence. And then, based on the class information you get, you will know what the process is and how things will happen.
Class dismissed.
Hi, guys. Most people don't lose to debt collectors because you owe money. You lose because you were never taught the rules of the system hunting them. You answer the phone when you shouldn't. You explain when you should stay silent. You ignore letters until the wrong letter arrives, the one stamped by a court. By the time you realize you're in danger, the process is already halfway finished. Now, I wrote a course called Debt Collections, Lies, Damn Lies, and Deceit. Now, why did I do that? Because I wanted something to stop this. If you didn't have the money to pay the bill back then, what makes them think you can pay now? Do you think you are motivated by some snarky third-party debt collector? And more importantly, how do you know that they have the right to collect the debt? You simply don't. Your bills keep going up. Everything costs more, but you haven't had a raise in 10 years. This is not a motivational course. It is a defensive operations manual for surviving the modern collection economy. When a student finishes this program, you just don't know about debt collection. You understand how it actually works. You learn where collectors apply pressure, when mistakes turn into leverage, when silence makes debt more valuable, and how one wrong sentence can cost you your home. First, you learn what not to do, why casual phone calls create evidence, why updating your contact information can and will hurt you, why explaining hardship becomes an admission, why ignoring collectors doesn't weaken accounts, it strengthens them. Then you learn what real control looks like. You learn by listening to a real debt collection call and hear the subtext where the collector is fishing for admissions, where FDCPA violations are happening in real time, and where leverage is quietly being handled by them, if you know how to recognize it. You will learn how to run validation, how to demand ownership, how to expose broken chains of title, how to collapse resale value, and how to force a collector to prove you exist beyond a spreadsheet. You learn how to hold a phone call without bleeding information. And by the way, do you actually have to talk to somebody you don't want to? How to maintain composure. How to say one sentence that freezes the moment of an entire account. You don't just learn the FDCPA. You learn how to use it, not as trivia, as leverage. You learn how lawsuits are actually built, why you arrive when you do, how to dismantle them before a summons ever leaves the printer. And when litigation is already in motion, you are shown how to draft responses that don't beg, don't posture, but strategically pressure the weaknesses that debt buyers never want exposed. Because everything is taught. How collections work, we teach that. How you fail, we teach that. How you're monetized, we teach that. And how to stop them, we teach that. This course doesn't promise miracles, but you do have rights. And one of those rights is the right to maintain your silence. And I am giving away a major secret right now. Say this on the first phone call. I will not talk to you unless and until you send me the proof of debt to the address you have on record. That's it. You have the right to remain silent. Use it. Now hang up. It promises something far more dangerous to the debt collection industry. It promises informed resistance. Most people believe debt collection is about money. That belief alone has already cost them. You think the system is emotional. It is. That it responds to hardship. It does not. That if you're polite, cooperative, or invisible long enough, the pressure will soften. It does not. What debt collectors, lies, damn lies, and deceit, the course, in a way nothing else on the market ever attempts, is remove that illusion completely. You'll learn why staying silent doesn't protect you. It makes your debt more valuable. You finally see how ignoring collectors flags their file as low-friction inventory, making it more profitable to sell, easier to automate into litigation, and more attractive to the next buyer who is never even seen their face. The course doesn't just say, don't ignore collectors. It explains in mechanical detail what happens inside a debt portfolio the moment a consumer goes quiet, how to resale value increases, how to validation, how validation risk decreases, how the litigation conveyor belt quietly warms up in the background. Then you teach them what validation actually is, not the folklore version, not the copy-paste template version, but the forensic version. Students learn that's you, that validation isn't about asking what you owe. It's about demanding proof that the collector exists as a lawful claimant at all. You learn how to distinguish between cosmetic responses and evidentiary ones, how chain of title collapses across portfolios, how assignments differ from purchases, why spreadsheets aren't proof, and why most debt buyers are structurally incapable of surviving courtroom scrutiny. You learn how to run validation not as a letter, but as a process interruption that freezes value, contaminates litigation readiness, and shifts the burden of proof back where it belongs. Then comes the phone. For most people, the phone is where fear lives. In your course, the course that you would take, the phone becomes a laboratory. Students listen to real calls, analyze tone, timing, word choice, escalation patterns. You learn why collectors never start with threats. You start with questions. You learn what questions are neutral and which ones are fishing expeditions. You learn how collectors use artificial urgency, soft empathy, and scripted confusion to coax admissions out of emotionally exhausted people. And you learn the most dangerous truth of all, that most lawsuits are built out of the borrower's own mouth. You don't just tell them to say less. You show them exactly how every sentence becomes an affidavit, how a single phrase, I can't afford it, I was laid off, I meant to pay, is converted into evidentiary scaffolding later. You don't memorize just a script. You understand why the script works and why the system collapses when you stop narrating their own downfall. Then we go inside the surveillance layer nobody talks about. Social media, skip tracing, payment apps, family networks, digital exhaust. You learn that privacy is not a setting, it's a behavior. You see how wedding photos become address information, how LinkedIn updates become wage garnishment prep, how Venmo transactions become relational mapping. You stop thinking of debt collectors as callers and start seeing them as data analysts with a legal license to knock. We don't stop at the law. You go to litigation. Students learn how lawsuits are groomed, not triggered. You learn how silence, call logs, data accumulation, and procedural missteps stack quietly until a file is deemed litigation ready. You learn what happens before a summons is ever printed. You learn how to interrupt that grooming phase. And when interruption fails, you learn how to draft responses that don't beg, posture, or flail, but strategically expose standing failures, chain of title gaps, evidentiary weaknesses, and procedural violations. You were taught how to build paper trails that survive court, and woven through all of it is the deeper lesson. Modern credit scoring is no longer measures whether someone pays. It measures how you survive. You learn how behavior is profiled, how dependency is penalized, why forgotten collections resurface at exactly the wrong moments, and how microscopic accounts cost homes, jobs, clearances, and licenses, not because of money, but because of timing. You no longer answer the phone emotionally. You answer it strategically, or not at all. You don't fear the system. You see it. And once you see it, the system loses its favorite advantage, which is your confusion. This course doesn't promise to make debt disappear. It promises something far more dangerous to the industry than profits from silence: control, is everything.
Well, thank you, John, for all that information. It's going to be a really great course. There's just so much to learn, and you have so much knowledge. I really appreciate you taking the time and making the effort to create this to educate. And that's what we've always been about, John. You and I have been about credit and financial education, and this is going to be very well needed. It's needed. So thank you for that, John. Again, I
Yeah.
want to tell everybody, I am JS Waldo. You can find me at jswaldo.substack.com. And we are talking with our credit genius, our guru, John Mackey. You can find him at creditgenius.substack.com. Follow along. If you're watching on YouTube, as they say, ring that bell, like us. If you have any questions, please leave us comments. You can also contact us directly through Substack, and we will always answer your questions. The course itself, Debt Collections, Lies, Damn Lies, and Deceit, can be found at John's website, which is going to be put on the screen for you right here. And again, please check it out. It's going to be just such useful information. I think you're going to learn a lot. I know I have. I've already learned a lot just from talking with you, John. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, JS. Thanks for taking the bull by the horns here. We're both flabbergasted at how much we've lost recently in our protections as consumers. And that's why I'm trying to get this information out. And we're seeing the addition of debt collections that are just running amok right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not that if you owe a debt, you shouldn't pay it. That's not my point. And that's not the point of this whole process. It's to know what your rights are. Just like with the Miranda warning, you may have done the crime, you may do the time. But we simply need to know what our rights are. And they're being trampled every day. Every day.
Yes, exactly. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Again, this is Give Me Credit. I'm JS Waldo with John Mackey. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.